Guys, do you want to pop up for the panel here? And Sam, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, we can sit.
Yeah, let's sit. I'm sure the audience has a bunch of questions. I might just kick it off with one that actually has been top of mind for me a lot. Is we talk a lot about like DeFi mechanism security, smart contract security, but if you look at a lot of the biggest hacks have been operational security misses, like private keys getting hacked, like DNS getting hacked, and front ends being rerouted. How do you guys think about advice for teams building here to like make sure that part of their security stack is taken care of? And is there any advice you have?
I'll try to start. Obviously, as you mentioned, security is a whole thing. We just discussed about how you approach contracts and whatever. But yeah, in reality, we saw recently, Curve and many others has issues with DNS and so on. So I think that there is no single solution for that. What you have to do is you have to monitor more. I think that one of the, also Convex, if I remember correctly, with Sam, we managed the issue over there. There was a poisoning attack. So the idea is you should use the best practices also for protecting Web 2 infrastructure, especially front-end and DNS. But again, you have to monitor. So you have to look if everything is going to change. You have to apply also security on, or your code base, checking the dependencies. So there are plenty of solutions that you have to do. My only consideration is that for all those problems, there are already solutions because are Web 2 issues. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have just to check how you would protect a traditional part of the Web 2 infrastructure. But obviously, I think that Sam, you mentioned in the slide showed there are plenty of young teams, and maybe you have to deliver so fast that you maybe forgot those things. And I suggest that as soon as you launch, you have to look also on those things if you cannot afford at the very first.
I'll take a shot because this is actually a question we thought about at Immunefi from before day one. We found this particular method to be very effective, which is to do threat modeling as early as you possibly can, ideally from the very start. So in our business, we knew that there was going to be a lot of sensitivity. We're handling very sensitive secrets, very sensitive workflows, and it was going to be an important part of what we were building to do it in such a way that it maximized security. And so we modeled out, okay, well, what kind of operation are we creating if things go well? What kind of infrastructure are we likely to have? Just loosely, because you don't have too much time to waste on that. What are the likely vulnerabilities? Who's going to want to come after us? What are they going to be trying to get? How is that going to work? And by doing that exercise very early on and then repeating that exercise every few months, were our assumptions correct? Our mind was constantly pulled towards operational security in a much more comprehensive way than strictly looking at on-chain infrastructure. And that has propelled itself even to today and worked its way into our culture. Every single, all hands, every single major meeting, we're talking about phishing, we're talking about scams, we're talking about different kinds of breaches that can occur. It's just kind of worked our way to be like, hey, let's be obsessive about this. And we know any team in the space is not going to have the resources to even go after best practices. So saying, oh, well, why don't you solve this? Why don't you work on it? It's just, that's not really an option, especially for a younger team, but even for a larger team. Like there's too many different workflows. There's too many things you don't know. Your best option if you have infinite money is to hire a lot of people for it, but then you hired a lot of people for it, new problems. What we did, at least for us, is like, we're thinking about it all the time. We're thinking about what our threat model is, and we start triaging it. Okay, what's the most probable area that someone's going to come after us? Where's our central vulnerability today? What's best practices today? Who do we know that can answer this question today in case we don't have the expertise in-house? And this allowed us to cover a lot of those operational areas and eventually help other teams with that in a way that we saw as very uncommon. So culture, I guess. Threat modeling early, culture, making that a repeating and early process is the kind of the only way we think to constantly level up your operational security as you grow.
Sam, did you have any thoughts on that?
Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Mostly about how to also beef up the operational security side of the protocols, like because there's just a lot of like unglamorous attacks, like DNS security, even just Discord hacks where the community gets rugged.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to just best practice, right? Like making sure you use 2FA, making sure that you don't click on trusted links, you don't install it. Like, what's that one big Discord hack that went around? Like, you clicked on this bookmarklet, right, and that like executed some JavaScript that like expelled your token. And so like a lot of this like Web2 OPSEC stuff is just using, or like that screensaver one, right, where it's like you get this DM and it's like, oh, like please test my game, and it's like this archive and there's a screensaver file that like executes some code. Yeah, I think a lot of this is just like having good digital hygiene. Obviously, if you get hit by some ODE or if you get hit by like DNS cache poisoning attack, like there wasn't much you could do to stop that. So like, try your best, but like don't sweat over it. But like, yeah, everything else just don't be silly online.
Great, thanks. Looking forward, like 2 to 3 years, do you guys think there's any sort of security silver bullets that you're excited about, like that can redefine the space?
That's spicy. I like to think that what we're building, when it gets to a scale that is 10 to 100 times larger than today, will be the closest thing to that. But I don't really believe in silver bullets. Like my vibe about it is the same way I look at operational security. Like the attack surface is too vast. There are too many problems. There's too much value on the line. Security is a loser's game, and it's a critical one, and we have to play it. But I don't foresee any great solution that will, turn the tables in our favor in a big way, other than the continuing work on a whole bunch of different layers of the stack by a bunch of brilliant people in parallel. And that's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I like to encourage.
Yeah, my hope in this sense is that security starts to switch from a cost from any group, any protocol, to more an investment, and becomes part of the culture of the developers, as we had with DevOps, basically. So where people don't just develop things, but also maintain on production. And so here the idea is that if we are able to provide a sustainable and a cost-effective way for people to embed security at first, that for me would be a very good achievement. So I think that with these kind of events and companies working on pushing about adopting security practices and building more effective tools, embedding, maybe hiding security, is the best.
Sam, any thoughts from you?
Yeah. Well, I think just that I don't believe there's going to be, one silver bullet, like Mitchell says. This is definitely not, like, if you're in this game to sort of like get out in 2 years because you've like found the holy grail of security, I think that's probably the wrong mindset. But other than that, I would agree with what everyone already said.
Great. Maybe one more that is...
We lost him.
Network connectivity, geez.
He keeps escaping from us.
Well, I'll keep it going until he can reconnect. Emiliano, you touched on this a little bit with the big red button and the tension between having the ability to pause contracts and immutability. And how do you think about that moving forward, especially with maybe regulatory concerns about the ability to stop contracts? Is the goal like we don't have a big red button in 5 years once your contract is fully deployed, bug free, hopefully?
Let me check first if there is someone in the audience that can listen to me. No, that's a very hard decision for any team. I talk with teams that want to have some degree of control to protect their users, and many others that instead want to say, we cannot do anything. So that's the code, that's the rule. So if you accept, that's a risk. So I think that there is always a trade-off, especially if you see big players like Compound, Aave, but also Yearn. They have some degree of control. I think that the challenge here is how you can get the minimum amount of control to limit the maximum loss that you may have, and not having access to the user funds. So in one of the examples, that's why it's an example, I say that the governance can access to the funds and move somewhere else. Obviously, that would raise many regulatory concerns because you can effectively access to those funds. But if you write the contracts in a way that those funds maybe get moved to in a specific vault that will be getting controlled by the token holders or whatever, maybe could correct. So I think that the challenge here is that how I can design the security operations in a way that I can guide the protocol in a safe way without, rising regulatory concerns. So that's the challenge, and that's a good challenge, honestly.
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, this is a bug bounty question. And the question is, do you think a bug bounty can get so big it actually can create perverse incentives? And to give a motivating example, let's say I'm a protocol dev and there's a $10 million bounty on my protocol, and I realize, oh no, oops, I've accidentally shipped a bug. But I can call up my, my good gray hat friend to report through a back channel. He'll claim the bounty. We'll split it, down the middle or whatever we think is fair, and run off with the money. So, just with that example, do you think there's potential for that sort of perverse incentive, and how can it be addressed?
Absolutely. That's a definite risk in doing this. The only way to address that is, where effort should be going first is monitoring your developer pipeline. And, before you go and you put a massive reward up, which comes with all these potential risks, right? It's an incredibly useful tool, but it comes with risks. All those risks can be addressed by making deeper investments into your culture, into your dev pipeline, into your code review process first, right? Into your hiring and selection process. Like, that's where your money and energy should go before then. And if you don't make if you don't address those things, then you're just blind to what degree you have bug bounty risk. Now, I'm going to note, we've never actually observed such a case. So we've thought about it from the beginning, hypothetically. It's on our list of things to watch for, like when will this scenario appear and what are the potential markers for it, and it's never occurred, insofar as we can tell. It would be hard to see, but it's never occurred. But, easy to deal with. Bug bounty is the last line of defense, not the first one. Invest in everything else first.
Question: How is bug bounty programs for Web3 world are different from Web2? Like, I'm not sure we can do like full disclosure about the bug or something like that.
So we use the same name, and that was like a practical business decision. But in operation, they are very materially different, especially for the work that we do on Immunefi. So for one thing, the kind of contractual stance between the parties is completely different. On traditional Web 2, a lawyer writes the program, and then maybe a lawyer receives the report or interacts with it in some way, and they set you up so that they have maximum protection. But in Web 3, the opposite is an inherent reality. Like, the fact that this person has a critical vulnerability means that they already have power over you, and it's not your call, it's not your decision. You don't have as many options. You don't get to control this situation. And so that changes the entirety of how the programs are structured, which is where a lot of our attention goes. It's very unsexy, unappreciated part of the work, but we hit the programs and we optimize them to solve certain problems. And it comes down to if we treat these parties as equal parties that each have power over one another, what does that look like? That looks like clear expectation setting. That looks like very clearly defined functions for dealing with common edge cases. And that is the total opposite of how bug bounty programs in Web 2 are today, where the companies will preserve the maximum flexibility to basically do whatever they want. So that's a really big difference. And that is felt, by the way, right? Like, there's a lot more tension in these reports. They are more, and it contributes to the difficulty of running this type of operation and running these types of reports. There's a lot more tension in the transaction because at any point, even though the White House has shown his good faith by disclosing the information, right, and really cutting down his leverage, hypothetically, until the fix is in, he can execute that whenever he wants, right? And the projects feel that tension, and it's like, so that is a really big difference. We have some of that in Web 2, but in Web 3, it's like every other major transaction is like that. So we are constantly doing mediations to calm people down. It's a much more equal playing field, and it's becoming more in favor of hackers over time, not less, right? Something that we have to address.
Hey, two things. One is I just wanted to make a comment about that good question about if developers could potentially exploit bug bounties. And I'm curious if you agree this is true or not. In a lot of other industries, they have this problem as well, that if you're in banking or other things, if it's ever a point where you solely have the ability to commit a crime, then it's a mistake in the system. So there's this idea is just as long as there's, sort of 2 or 3 people who are kind of checking each other, once you get to a point where it forces a conspiracy of people to come together to commit a crime, it's much less likely to happen because people just fundamentally have this prisoner's dilemma. They don't trust each other. So it's like what you're saying in the developer's pipeline, but a little differently, just saying make sure that people know there's other people checking their work. And once you have that, it's very hard to feel safe that you can slip something through. Is that reasonable?
Better answer than mine.
Okay. All right. The other thing I was going to say was when it comes on the user side, you guys didn't talk about a lot, but it seems to me like a lot of the user side of the security threshold is really about the UX and how much safety wraps around the user in their wallet experience, in their Web 2 interface, and some level of either educating users if they want to kind of go off the rails and run things themselves, or give them some version of safe DeFi where they basically are kind of curated through the experience and somebody warns them you should not be looking at your private key. You should not be doing this type of transaction. If, somebody got you to this point doing this, call up customer service because something's going wrong. So it just seems like that's a very big threshold on the security side is, thinking about how to basically protect users who typically are just either apathetic or ignorant or some combination of them when it comes to security.
But that's most of them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I hope I'm smart, but when it comes to security, I feel very stupid, honestly.
So I really like the idea of this disclosure flywheel. What do you think is the appropriate ratio between payouts for white hat reporting and value at risk?
So before I give an answer, I really want to hear Sam and Emiliano's answers as white hats who have done so much for the space and been on the receiving end of this case. So stakeholders, right, what's your answer?
Sam first, please.
Oh God. Wait, sorry. Was this the last person? Sorry, I don't think I actually got what the question was.
Dan is asking about what's the threshold between the payout for bounties and the value at risk for a protocol, basically.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you're the white hat, number go up is better. But I think the current meta of 10% is pretty good, right? It's it seems like a pretty good compromise between not, stiffing the white hat hacker on, a big payout and also not being so big as, because I make this point a lot of times whenever this conversation comes up is you have to keep in mind that for a lot of protocols, the amount of value at risk is not their money, right? It's not the protocol's money to actually go and give away. And so I think 10% seems like a pretty good balance between a number that's big enough that it doesn't, stiff the white hat, but also it's small enough that it might not, put the project into bankruptcy because they can't actually afford that percent of TVL.
Yeah. I agree totally with what Sam said. Just to add, I think that the hidden rule was that you have to pay at least 10% of the value at risk that you have in general. But I think that as soon as you grow, becomes unsustainable. I think that bug bounties fits in one of the solutions that you may have for protecting your protocol. We see the rise of insurances that can help you to multiply, let's say, the protection that you may have. We start to see reinsurance programs that try to help on coverage. But I think that we should stay on those, let's say, amounts. So something between 1 and 10%, depending on the scale that you have. But at some point, there should be a plateau, let's say, at fixed absolute amount. Otherwise, would be totally unsustainable.
Let me give an answer there because I have an unusual perspective. So I'm the guy who came up with the whole 10% model, right? And my primary thought there originally when coming up with it was not that it's correct. Like, it's a very primitive mechanism of price discovery. It's just that it feels fair. And that's where we should start, because the rewards are so mediocre that we had no bug bounty expertise or tooling in the space. We just didn't reward it at all. So we need to start with something that's reasonable, which was the 10% number. It feels fair, and it's good, and it's enough, given the money at risk. But as I've seen more and more cases, at least for me, my thinking is evolving, and I'm thinking at new price discovery mechanisms. Like, my problem is, I need the bounties to be large enough to disincentivize, to provide an effective alternative to black hat behavior, but they have to be small enough that they're not going to bankrupt the projects. They have to be reasonable enough. The capital sources have to be right. It has to feel fair for all parties around so that it's long-term sustainable. So what's the price discovery mechanism? What's the algorithm that I use to figure that out? And one of the conclusions that I'm coming to is that the 10% model is a great base, right? It's given us lots of valuable market data. It really works. But we can get a lot finer on that for solving different classes of security problems by providing different pricing mechanisms. And like, I want to go in that direction. That's my spare time right there. How do I find better ways that are more matched, that make the white hat hopefully even more money, but at the same time are much safer for the projects to employ, whereas the current model today has some serious costs. So I think in 1 year, I'm going to have a much better answer that is going to be different than the 10%.
Thank you to all the presenters. We're going to have a break now. If you can, yeah.
Here we go.